we need to look at tariffs, which are not justified unless all the money collected by a tariff in any form or in any fashion goes to the industry against which it is being collected. In other words, if you're creating a tariff against steel, then of course all the money that is collected from that tariff from a supposedly a different nation, which doesn't mean it actually is, it's your money. But all that money that's collected has to be given to the people to create another steel mill so that you don't have to import all the steel. That's what a tariff should be. That's what a tariff should amount to. There is no such thing as the Trump tariff, which is, just put it all in a pile of money so that we can spend it however we want. That's just another criminal organization being created by government officials to take your money and create power for themselves. There's nothing about that that is fair or justified or in any way governmentally allowed. Constitution doesn't allow people to create power for themselves. It creates a situation of government so that there is no purpose in power for individual over the other people. You have to create a government that allows for the freedom and the liberty and the power to be for all of us, not just a few of us. And of course, in order to implement that in this day and age, the university insurrection has been, or the insurgency has been, to create just a tiny few people get to make all the decisions. This is what a communist nation does. This is what cults do. This is the common denominator of university leads, is that only a tiny few people get to make all the choices. Everybody else gets to be the slave. Everybody else gets to be the slave. If they have made promises to you which they cannot keep, which is of course what the money is, they made promises to you which they cannot keep, and that means that you were their slave. Whether you believe you were a slave or not doesn't make any difference. The fact is that you were given a lot of money that has no value and will not sustain a value and cannot sustain a value because it doesn't have any reality to it. It's just a number. And what that number proves is that you crucified your own child to get it. And you crucified your own world because the garbage mountains are clear evidence against you. You did it. And of course all the poison and all top of all the water and all the water that you stole from the future and all the water, everything is you did it. You did it. That's how it is. You did it. So we have to rebuild. We have to have cities that are like they used to be, rural villages here and there, so that it's compact and people can walk to get whatever they need. And instead of plastic on everything, we have to have more perishable items and more reclosable packaging and everything that you could possibly think of that is not university created, back to the way it was, back to the way life was sustainable, back to the way of a future for the world, for the future for every child, for a future for all of life. And that means that all of the things that you did you can't do anymore. Even some of the things that used to be cannot be anymore. You cannot burn corpses. It takes too much heat. It takes too much energy. It takes too much pollution. It takes too much oxygen. You can't do it. And for that matter, you cannot take a grave out of the production of land. You cannot create suburbs that extend over billions of acres. You can't do anything that you do because it's all a lie. The world won't survive. Life won't survive. Humanity won't survive. It's all a lie. They said, "Let the children pay," and that's exactly what they meant by killing off the future. And of course they're preparing for that, which means that they're creating biological weapons to rule you out. They're creating biological weapons to make you sterile. They're creating biological weapons in every conceivable manner so that you can die and they cannot. And that would be, university led, because they're a group. They're the cult group, and of course you worship them as, smarter than us, but they're not smarter than us. Well, I guess they did make a maze, and they did create traps, and they did steal from you, and they did enslave you, and they did take your nation and throw it away, and they did everything that they could think of to hate you. But they're not superior. They're just more crafty. It's an intellectual war, and you need to wake up and realize that, because an intellectual war means that your primary enemies are hiding behind the door, shoving people out. It's like a snake that crawls into a hole and attacks every rat that's in there. And then, of course, the rats have to escape, and then they're out here in public taking, a crime from you. The criminal organization is wide and varied and nasty. Everything that you, I don't know of anything that hasn't been infiltrated by the corruption and the conspiracy and the collusion to destroy this nation in itself. What is left that isn't a lie or a theft or a cheat or a manipulation or a propaganda or anything other than what it ought to be. So we need to create a new world. We need to create a new life. We need to go back in a lot of ways to the way it was in the 50s. And we can't go back to the 50s because there isn't any resource for that. Can't go back to the 50s because a lot of that was built upon interstates, which proved to be a tragedy for us all, because the end result is all these automobiles everywhere. And of course, the fossil fuel problem that they burn and the oxygen that they consume and all of that means you can't do that either. So I'm telling you everything that you don't want to hear. And so you turn it off and you're like, I'm not going to listen. But you're going to die instead, because truth will decide. It doesn't matter what you believe, truth will decide. Doesn't matter what you believe. Doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter if you're the prettiest damn girl that ever lived or the ugliest. It doesn't matter, because truth will decide what the future will be. And of course, as far as business and corporations and things go, there's a limit to the size of a corporation that has value to us. There is not a need for a lot of corporations that are very large. Just don't need them. And there's no reason to have them if we don't need them. There's not a lot of reason for factories that we don't need, because factories make it possible to throw all the resources in the garbage. Every garbage mountain is built upon the factory that created it. Every resource that is consumed is, built upon what we do to get it. We have to, things like Amazon and what have you, if we have limited capitalism, that means that it doesn't benefit you to have a huge organization of millions of people employed by you or something. That doesn't matter. You don't get to have the money. You don't get to have the money. There's a limit to how much money, how much possession, what you can and cannot control. There is a limit. And that means you have to sell off parts and pieces and things like that to other people so that they can have a job of their own. We don't need a lot of robots. A few might be useful, but we don't need many, because they do not help us. They're just a toy for the university to create. So in other words, once the robot gets to be the point where we don't need humans anymore, then of course they can kill you. And that's literally what they mean to do. They mean to kill you. We don't need humans anymore. We don't need slaves. We have robots. That's the plan. And anyway, to avoid the illusion that bigger is better is a common problem here. We've got to go to the big place because it's going to be cheaper than the little place. But if we identify and provide for each little place to say, this is the amount of money we're going to attach to the product that we sell. In other words, if every product in the store we sell is 10% over the price that we have to pay to get it, that means that we compete equally with larger places. So, that's all you have to do to create, buy from hometown. Don't buy from the big store, because we all, the big store might provide for, 9% instead of 10%. Or the little store can say, well, I'll try to compete with that. But whatever it is, you can be assured that the price that you pay is realistic to the product that you're going to buy. And that makes every business equal, or every business basically the same. Although bigger stores will have a variety, but that's bigger. That's, what they do. But the end result is that we cannot have big stores and cannot have, thousands or millions of people driving thousands of miles to go buy something, to go buy a loaf of bread. We cannot have that. There has to be little places along the way, and we have to identify and create them as we go. We have to have a no more driving 100 miles to go to a job. No more of that. We have to have the job close at hand, and that means we have to separate the jobs into bits and pieces that we can survive, sustain ourselves with. We cannot depend on fertilizers that are not going to be here anymore. We were set to run out of fertilizer some years back, but they found another batch of it so that we could continue on. But phosphorus is one of the fertilizers that are absolutely necessary for production of food as is today, and that's running out. There is nothing that won't run out, because it is a finite planet. You can't just go get more, and you can't just assume that anything and everything that you want it to be is as it is expected to be. I would tell my dad that there's a lot of oxygen being consumed by fire. Every person has a certain amount of oxygen that they need, and he would point to the big tree on the yard and say, well, that produces all the oxygen I need. I don't need any more than that. But he, of course, didn't know anything about whether or not the tree was actually producing any oxygen, or how much it was producing, or any of that. The Biosphere 2 project produced a clear, definitive reality of just how much plants and stuff release oxygen, because oxygen is an element. It's a finite resource that we don't make here. It's an atom that we don't make here. It's a finite resource. And the Biosphere 2 project, 7 million cubic feet of air, with 8 people inside and no fires at all, and they were beating their way out in 2 months, because the oxygen content was that diminished. And the one thing that they hadn't planned for was no oxygen to breathe. They didn't consider that to be a thing at all. They figured, look at that tree is all I need. But of course it wasn't true. Truth decides. And that's all there is to it. Truth decides. You can't make believe your way into whatever it is you want. You can decide whatever eternity is by your religion. You can make believe whatever you want to about how life created, or where you go, or whatever it is you want. You can believe whatever you want, but that will not keep you alive. Only truth will keep you alive. And so, every portion, every part of everything that I've ever been trying to tell you for the last 50 years is go investigate the reality of our lives and prove what is true. Prove the cost of being wrong, and accept the choice is to let truth decide. That is our choice, to let truth decide. Anything less than that is a fantasy. And of course, that's what the universities produce. They produce fantasies and delusions and imagination beyond compare. They even produce, through media, fancy colored lights and blinking and flashing and what have you, to convince you that you don't have to worry, you don't have to think about anything, because, imagination will take care of it. Well, it won't. And there are, methods and means and manners of how we can recreate life in this society as best we can, and we need all kinds of inventors and things to people to help us do that as best we can. And the Patent Office is just another thief, criminal organization throughout every part and every piece of American society. There isn't anything that hasn't been contaminated by the criminal corruption of the university is God. There isn't anything about life in America that isn't corrupted by a conspiracy of the university. We know it all. We know everything. Well, they don't know everything. They just imagine they know everything. They delude themselves that debts don't have to be paid except to them. They delude themselves about that. And they create the false impression that they're actually paying for anything when they're just counterfeiting currency so they can pay for everything. It's just a lie. One